Have you ever noticed how easily your attention can leave you? You wake up in the morning, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already somewhere else. You are thinking about what someone said yesterday. You are wondering why they did not respond. You are replaying a conversation, analyzing a look, interpreting a silence, imagining what someone might be thinking about you. You have not even entered the new day, yet part of you is still living inside another person's behavior. And when this happens often enough, you begin to feel tired without understanding why. It is not always the events of life that exhaust you. Sometimes it is the amount of attention you give to things you cannot control. You think about who approves of you, who misunderstands you, who has changed, who has moved on, who seems happier, who appears more successful, who did not appreciate what you gave, who should have treated you differently. And little by little, your inner world becomes occupied by everyone except you. This is one of the quiet ways we abandon ourselves. Not because loving others is wrong. Love is one of the most beautiful expressions of who you are. Compassion, kindness, generosity, and connection are not weaknesses. They are natural expressions of the deeper self. But love and self-abandonment are not the same thing. Caring about someone does not require you to spend your life inside their mind. Compassion does not require you to carry another person's emotional state. Forgiveness does not require you to return to what continually wounds you. And love does not require you to give another person authority over your peace. There comes a moment in the spiritual journey when you begin to understand something very simple. Your attention is sacred. Where you place it, your life energy follows. And perhaps the invitation before you now is not to become less loving toward others, but to stop disappearing from yourself while you love them. Come back. Come back to your own consciousness. Come back to your own breath. Come back to what is happening within you. Come back to the quiet place beneath all the noise where you no longer need the entire world to behave differently before you can feel whole. For many people, focusing on yourself sounds selfish, but there is another way to understand it. Focusing on yourself does not mean making yourself the center of the universe. It means returning to the center within yourself. It means remembering that your peace cannot permanently be supplied by another person. It means recognizing that your worth does not increase when someone praises you and does not decrease when someone misunderstands you. It means discovering that your deepest identity is not the anxious self who needs approval, not the wounded self who keeps replaying the past, and not the frightened ego trying to control everything that may happen next. There is something deeper in you. There is an awareness beneath all of these changing experiences. A quiet presence. A consciousness that was there before the praise, before the criticism, before the relationship, before the heartbreak, before the success, before the disappointment. And when you begin to live from that deeper place, your relationship with the world changes. You stop asking everyone else to tell you who you are. Perhaps you have spent years waiting for someone to give you something you could only truly give yourself. You may have been waiting for understanding, waiting for appreciation, waiting for permission, waiting for an apology, waiting for someone to choose you, waiting for a person to change so that you can finally relax. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to be loved, respected, or understood. But suffering begins when you decide that you cannot be peaceful until another person gives you what you are waiting for. Then your peace becomes conditional. I will be happy when they come back. I will feel worthy when they recognize my value. I will forgive when they apologize. I will relax when I know what they are thinking. I will be at peace when life finally follows my plan. But life rarely agrees to these conditions. People change. Relationships shift. Plans collapse. Doors close. Someone who once understood you may misunderstand you tomorrow. Someone you thought would remain may choose another road. Someone may never give you the explanation you hope for. And if your inner freedom depends upon another person reaching a particular level of awareness, you may spend years waiting outside a door they never open. At some point, something wiser within you begins asking a different question. How long will I allow what someone else does to determine what happens inside me? This is not a question of blame. It is a question of freedom. You cannot control every event. You cannot control every person. You cannot control whether someone approves of you, whether they remain, whether they understand your intentions, or whether they choose to grow. But you can begin to become aware of what happens within you when life does not give you what you expected. And awareness changes everything. Imagine the sky. Clouds move across it continuously. Some clouds are light and beautiful. Others are dark. Some carry storms. Some disappear almost as soon as they arrive. But the sky does not become the cloud. It holds the cloud without losing its nature. Your thoughts are like that. Someone criticizes you, and a cloud appears. Someone rejects you, and another cloud moves in. Someone else succeeds, and comparison darkens the sky. An old memory returns, and suddenly the entire inner landscape seems covered. The ego says, "This cloud is who you are. You are rejected. You are behind. You are not enough. You have been wronged. You will always feel this way." But awareness allows another possibility. You can notice the cloud. You can say, fear is here. Jealousy is here. Anger is here. Sadness is here. The need for approval is here. And in the moment you can observe an emotion, you have already discovered that you are more than the emotion. There is something in you that sees it. This witnessing presence is the beginning of freedom. Instead of immediately saying, they do not value me, therefore I have no value, you begin to notice there is a part of me that is frightened of not being valued. Instead of saying, they must change so I can be peaceful, you notice, I have placed my peace in their hands. Instead of saying, I cannot move on until they explain themselves, you may quietly ask, do I really want my future to depend upon their awareness? These questions do not condemn you. They return you to yourself. And this is the difference between blame and responsibility. Blame says everything that happened was your fault. That is not true. Other people have free will. People act carelessly. People betray. People leave. Life brings loss. Things happen that you never requested and would never have chosen. But responsibility says, although I did not choose everything that happened, I can choose what I continue carrying. That is your freedom. Someone may have handed you anger. You do not have to turn it into your identity. Someone may have rejected you. You do not have to spend the next 10 years using that rejection as evidence against yourself. Someone may have misunderstood you. You do not have to abandon your own truth trying to control their perception. The moment you begin to understand this, your attention begins coming home. Think of your inner world as a garden. Imagine a gardener who spends every day looking over the fence. Why is their garden greener? Why did their flowers bloom first? Why is their tree taller? Why does their life seem easier? The gardener becomes so interested in what is happening next door that the soil beneath his own feet begins to dry. Seeds remain unattended. Roots receive no water. Flowers that could have grown never receive enough care. This is what comparison does inwardly. Every time you become consumed by another person's path, you may be standing at the fence of someone else's life while neglecting the life that was given to you. And your inner garden does not need criticism. It needs attention. It needs patience. It needs silence. It needs forgiveness. It needs honest reflection. It needs you to stop speaking to yourself in the voice of people who once made you feel small. It needs you to stop punishing yourself because your life does not look like someone else's. Nature does not compare this way. A rose does not look at an oak tree and say, I have failed because I am not as tall. The moon does not apologize because it cannot shine like the sun. Winter does not feel inferior to spring. Each thing expresses itself according to its nature and season. Perhaps you can begin to offer yourself the same permission. Your life has its own timing. There are seasons when growth is visible. There are seasons when roots are forming where no one can see them. A seed beneath the soil may look like nothing is happening, yet everything necessary for the future is beginning in darkness. How often have you judged yourself during a season of roots? You called yourself stuck when you were learning patience. You called yourself lost when an old identity was falling away. You thought your life was going nowhere because the transformation happening within you could not yet be seen from the outside. The ego wants visible proof. The deeper self recognizes quiet change. Perhaps someone criticizes you today, and instead of carrying it for 3 days, you carry it for 3 hours. That is growth. Perhaps comparison appears, but you notice it and return to gratitude. That is growth. Perhaps someone becomes distant and the old fear of abandonment appears, but instead of chasing reassurance, you sit with yourself and listen. That is growth. Perhaps you say no without writing an entire explanation to justify your boundary. That is growth. Spiritual transformation is often much quieter than the ego expects. The ego wants a dramatic moment when everything changes forever. Awareness works differently. It invites you to return again and again. One of the places where this becomes most obvious is approval. Many people spend much of their lives trying to become acceptable. You may have learned early that being agreeable kept the peace. You may have discovered that being useful earned affection. You may have learned that certain parts of you were easier for others to love, so you began hiding the parts they did not understand. Perhaps you learned to read the room before you learned to read your own heart. You became sensitive to everyone's mood. You knew when someone was disappointed before they said a word. You learned when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to apologize, when to disappear. And perhaps these patterns once protected you. There is no need to judge them. But what protects you in one season can imprison you in another. People-pleasing often appears to be kindness from the outside, but inside, it may be fear. Will they still love me if I disagree? Will they leave if I say no? Will they think I am selfish if I honor my limits? Will I still belong if I stop performing? These questions touch a deep human longing. Everyone wants to belong, but there comes a point when belonging to everyone else begins costing you belonging to yourself. That is the moment when inner awareness becomes necessary. You begin noticing where you say yes while something within you whispers no. You notice how often you explain yourself because you are afraid of being misunderstood. You notice how your mood changes according to another person's mood. You notice how praise expands you and criticism collapses you, and you do not attack yourself for any of it. You simply see it. Awareness does not need to destroy the ego. It only needs to illuminate it. A dark room does not have to fight light. The moment light enters, darkness is no longer the only reality. The same is true within you. You can notice the part that wants approval. You can say, I see how frightened I am of disappointing them. I see how much I want this person to reassure me. I see how strongly I want to control the outcome. And perhaps instead of judging these parts, you can meet them with understanding. The part that seeks approval is often not evil or weak. It may simply be afraid of rejection. The part that wants control may be afraid of uncertainty. The part that compares may be afraid of being left behind. The part that becomes attached may be afraid that love can disappear at any moment. When you see these patterns with compassion, something softens. You stop being at war with yourself. And this is important because you cannot return to peace by attacking yourself for not already being peaceful. You cannot shame yourself into awakening. You cannot hate the ego into disappearing. You move beyond fear by seeing it clearly and remembering that it is not the deepest truth of who you are. The ego is a way of seeing yourself as separate from others, separate from life, separate from source. It says your value must be proven. Your image must be protected. Your future must be controlled. Your place must be defended. It says if someone rejects you, you become less. If someone succeeds, something has been taken from you. If a relationship ends, you have been abandoned by life. If your plans fail, life has betrayed you. If someone disagrees, you must defend who you are. And when you believe these thoughts completely, life becomes exhausting because you are constantly arranging the external world to protect an identity that never feels safe. But what if your deepest identity has never been in danger? What if beneath the personality, beneath the roles, beneath the wounds, beneath the need to be right, there is a part of you that has never needed protection? You may call it spirit. You may call it consciousness. You may call it the deeper self. You may call it the presence of God within. You may call it your connection to source. The name is less important than the recognition. There is something within you that does not rise and fall with public opinion. There is something in you that existed before you built an identity from what other people thought. Before you were successful, you were. Before you failed, you were. Before someone chose you, you were. Before they left, you were. Before the achievement, before the mistake, before the heartbreak, there was awareness, there was presence, there was life itself moving through you. And the spiritual journey is not about creating this deeper self. It is about remembering it. This is why silence can be so powerful. The ego is constantly speaking. Fix this. Prove that. Explain yourself. Make them understand. Find out what they think. Control what comes next. Do more. Become more. Be more impressive. But beneath this noise, something quieter remains. The deeper self does not shout. It does not need to. It simply waits. Perhaps you have felt it near the ocean. For a few moments, your problems became smaller. Perhaps you felt it beneath the night sky. You looked upward and suddenly remembered that your life was part of something far larger than the argument occupying your mind. Perhaps you have felt it in a moment of love when nothing needed to be said, or in grief after the tears had exhausted themselves and there was only silence. These moments reveal something. You are not only your thoughts, you are the awareness in which thoughts appear. And when you remember this, focusing on yourself becomes something much deeper than self-improvement. It becomes spiritual return. You withdraw energy from the endless attempt to control other people, and you bring it home. You stop asking the world, who am I? You stop asking another person, am I enough? You stop asking the future, can you promise me that nothing will go wrong? And you begin listening inwardly. The ego may resist this because it survives through identification. My reputation, my wound, my success, my failure, my relationship, my past, my position, my story. It takes temporary experiences and turns them into permanent definitions. But you are not the story alone. You are the consciousness aware of the story. And once you see that, you begin to create space between what happens and who you believe yourself to be. Someone may reject you. Rejection happened. But you do not have to become rejected. Someone may betray you. Betrayal happened. But you do not have to become betrayal. A dream may fail. Failure happened. But you do not have to become failure. Pain can be part of your experience without becoming your identity. This is where forgiveness begins. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People imagine it means pretending nothing happened. They think forgiving means reopening a door, trusting someone again, or saying harmful behavior was acceptable. But forgiveness can be much simpler. It can mean that you are no longer willing to allow a past moment to determine the quality of your present consciousness. Imagine someone handed you a heavy stone years ago. They handed it to you through betrayal, cruelty, abandonment, or disappointment. At first, carrying the stone felt justified. It represented what happened. You remembered the words. You remembered the moment. You remembered how deeply it hurt. So you held the stone tightly. But years passed. Perhaps the person who gave it to you is no longer even part of your life. Yet every morning, you still pick up the stone. You carry it into new relationships. You carry it into quiet moments. You carry it into sleep. You carry it into decisions. And eventually you begin to understand something. Putting down the stone does not mean the stone never existed. It means you no longer want to organize your life around carrying it. Forgiveness is not a reward you give the person who hurt you. It is freedom you give yourself. Sometimes you will not be ready. That is okay. Forced forgiveness is not freedom. Telling yourself, I should be over this by now, can become another form of self-abandonment. Healing does not respond well to violence, even when the violence is spiritual language directed toward yourself. Instead, listen. Perhaps anger is protecting grief. Perhaps resentment is protecting disappointment. Perhaps your demand for an apology is really a longing for someone to acknowledge that your pain mattered. Allow yourself to see what is underneath. Then forgiveness can become honest rather than forced. You may eventually understand that some people will never give you the closure you imagined. They may never apologize. They may never admit what happened. They may never understand what they did. They may continue believing a completely different version of the story, and this can be painful. But if your peace depends upon their awakening, you are still placing your freedom in their hands. At some point, you may decide to stop waiting, not because they were right, not because the pain was insignificant, but because your life deserves to move again. A river does not stop flowing because a branch falls into it. The water adjusts. It moves around the obstacle. It continues. Perhaps healing is not always removing every painful thing from your past. Perhaps it is learning how to continue without making the obstacle your permanent home. This is surrender. Surrender is another word the ego often misunderstands. The ego thinks surrender means defeat. But spiritual surrender is not giving up on your life. It is giving up the demand that life must always happen according to your personal script. You may have carried a picture of how things were supposed to be. A relationship would last. A person would remain. A career would unfold a certain way. Your family would understand you. Your body would remain the same. Your dreams would arrive on your schedule. Then life changed the picture. A door closed. Someone left. A plan failed. Your identity changed. And the ego says, this should not be happening. That sentence creates enormous suffering. This should not be happening. They should not have said that. They should understand me. My life should be different by now. I should not feel this way. The mind begins arguing with reality. And although reality may already have moved on, the argument continues within you. Acceptance does not mean approval. Acceptance does not say everything that happened was good. It does not stop you from changing what can be changed. It simply says, this is what is here now. What is mine to do? That question can transform your life. What is mine to do? Not how do I make them understand? Not how do I change yesterday? Not how do I control 6 months from now? What is mine to do now? Perhaps it is to speak. Perhaps it is to remain silent. Perhaps it is to apologize. Perhaps it is to leave. Perhaps it is to forgive. Perhaps it is to set a boundary. Perhaps it is to rest before making a decision. This question returns you from the enormous burden of controlling everything to the simplicity of your next conscious step. And this is where intention becomes powerful. Intention is not the same as control. Control says, life must look exactly like this. Intention says, whatever happens, this is the quality of consciousness I choose to bring. You can wake up in the morning and choose peace, not because you expect everyone around you to behave peacefully, but because peace is the energy you wish to practice. You can choose honesty, not because honesty guarantees approval, but because integrity matters more than managing someone else's opinion. You can choose love, not because love prevents disappointment, but because you no longer want fear to make all of your decisions. This is living from the inside out. You choose who you are before circumstances tell you who to become. And when you live this way, relationships begin changing. You may still love deeply, but you cling less. You may still care what people feel, but you stop making yourself responsible for every emotion in the room. You may still feel disappointment, but disappointment does not have to become resentment. You may still be misunderstood, but misunderstanding no longer destroys your sense of self. You begin to understand that your job was never to arrange every person around you so carefully that nothing disturbed your peace. Your work was to discover a peace that did not depend so completely on arrangement. This does not mean you tolerate everything. Peace has boundaries. Love has wisdom. Compassion does not require closeness. You can understand why someone behaves as they do and still recognize that their behavior is unhealthy for you. You can forgive without returning. You can love from a distance. You can wish someone well and no longer give them access to your inner life. A gentle heart does not require weak boundaries, and strong boundaries do not require a hard heart. You can have both, compassion and discernment, forgiveness and self-respect, love and clarity. The ego tends to see only extremes. Either I stay or I hate them. Either I forgive or I approve. Either I care or I cut myself off emotionally. But wisdom allows a larger space. You can care and still leave. You can understand and still say no. You can forgive and still remember what the experience taught you. This balance becomes easier when you stop asking, how do I make them change? Instead, ask, who do I choose to be in the presence of what they are choosing? This restores power to you. Another place where this becomes important is attachment. Attachment can look like love, but the inner feeling is different. Love says, I care for you. Attachment says, I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel safe. Love gives space. Attachment tightens. Love allows another person to have a path. Attachment tries to manage that path. Perhaps you know this feeling. A message becomes shorter than usual. A person becomes quieter. Their tone changes. They do not respond as quickly as before. Immediately the mind begins creating a story. Are they losing interest? Did I do something wrong? Is someone else becoming more important? Am I about to be abandoned? One small uncertainty becomes an entire imagined future. Then fear begins making decisions. You seek reassurance. You over-explain. You become controlling. You withdraw before they can withdraw. You create conflict because conflict gives you something definite to respond to. And beneath all of this may be one painful belief. What if I am not enough? This is where focusing on yourself becomes an act of deep love. Instead of forcing another person to calm every fear, you become curious about the fear itself. What is this part of me afraid of? Where did I learn that another person's distance means something is wrong with me? Why do I believe uncertainty is the same as danger? What am I asking someone else to give me that I have never learned to offer myself? You do not ask these questions so you can analyze yourself endlessly. You ask because awareness creates space, and space creates choice. Without awareness, someone says something hurtful and you react instantly. With awareness, you feel the reaction beginning. You notice your chest tighten. You notice the urge to defend yourself. You notice the sentence forming in your mind. And suddenly, there is a small space, perhaps only a few seconds. But inside that space is freedom. You can breathe. You can ask, is this response coming from love or fear? You may still speak firmly. You may still set a boundary. You may still decide to leave. But the action is no longer coming only from the wounded part of you. It is coming from clarity. Reaction has urgency. It says, do something now. Prove yourself. Make them regret it. Fix this immediately. Clarity has space. Clarity can be strong without being cruel. It can be direct without needing to injure. And this is one of the most practical signs of spiritual growth. Not that you never feel anger. Not that you never become afraid. Not that you never feel jealous, insecure, disappointed, or lonely. You are human. Spiritual growth is not the removal of human emotion. It is the end of being unconsciously ruled by every emotion that appears. Anger may visit, fear may visit, loneliness may visit, comparison may visit. They are experiences moving through consciousness. You are the consciousness capable of meeting them. The ocean contains waves without becoming only the wave. You contain emotions without becoming only the emotion. And once you begin living from this awareness, you no longer need to fight every feeling. You can allow it, listen to it, learn from it, then let it move. This is very different from suppression. You are not saying, I should not feel this. You are saying, this feeling is here, but it does not get to decide everything. This creates a new relationship with yourself. And perhaps this is the relationship that was missing all along. You may have spent years trying to create better relationships with everyone else while rarely asking how you relate to yourself. What happens when you make a mistake? Do you speak to yourself with compassion or contempt? What happens when someone rejects you? Do you comfort yourself or immediately join them in rejecting yourself? What happens when you become tired? Do you listen or accuse yourself of being lazy? What happens when your life takes longer than expected? Do you trust your path or turn against yourself? You are always in relationship with yourself. And the quality of that relationship quietly enters every other relationship you have. If you do not believe you are worthy of respect, you may tolerate disrespect for too long. If you do not trust your own perception, you may depend constantly on other people to tell you what is true. If you cannot be alone with yourself, you may cling to relationships that have already ended inwardly. If you speak harshly to yourself, criticism from others will find familiar ground. This is why returning to yourself is not selfish. It makes healthier love possible. When you no longer need another person to complete you, you can love them without making them responsible for your wholeness. When you no longer need everyone to agree, you can actually listen. When you stop carrying resentment, you stop spreading the pain you received. When you become more peaceful within, peace becomes something you bring into relationships instead of something you constantly demand from them. And this brings us to source. The deeper you move beyond the ego, the more you begin to notice that your identity does not end at the boundaries of the personality. There is a life moving through you that you did not create. Your heart beats without your conscious command. Breath enters and leaves. Cells change. Seasons move. Life has an intelligence larger than the plans of the mind. You may call that intelligence source. You may call it God. You may call it universal consciousness. But whatever word you use, the spiritual invitation is to remember that you are not separate from the life that created you. The ego says, you are alone and must control everything. Source whispers, you belong to life. The ego says, prove your worth. Source reminds you that worth is inherent in being. The ego says, chase love. Source reminds you that love is your deepest nature. The ego says, defend yourself from every uncertainty. Source says, trust the next step. This does not mean life becomes predictable. Trust is not certainty. Trust is relationship. You begin developing a relationship with life in which you no longer demand to see the entire road before taking one honest step. Imagine standing beside a river at night. You cannot see where the river ends. You cannot see every turn, but the river continues. It follows its nature. Perhaps there is also an inner nature within you that becomes clearer when fear stops speaking so loudly. A nature that is more peaceful than the personality you built to survive. More patient, less concerned with proving, more forgiving, more willing to trust, not weak, simply less defended. When you live in this way, something remarkable begins happening. You stop forcing everything. You become less obsessed with making life match an image. You begin asking not, how can I control what happens, but how can I remain aligned with love as life happens? This is intention at its highest level. Suppose you must have a difficult conversation. The ego says they must understand me. They must apologize. They must agree. They must react in a way that proves I was right. You enter carrying an entire script for their behavior. Then they react differently. Suddenly you feel powerless because your peace was attached to their response. But what if your intention were simply this? I will speak honestly. I will listen. I will remain connected to myself. I will not betray my own truth. I will not try to injure, and I will allow the outcome to be what it is. You have moved from control to alignment. That is freedom. You can apply this everywhere. Instead of demanding that everyone respect you, intend to respect yourself. Instead of demanding that no one disappoint you, intend to remain open without abandoning discernment. Instead of demanding certainty, intend to meet uncertainty with presence. Instead of demanding that life move faster, intend to participate fully in the season you are in. And perhaps this is where gratitude becomes natural. Not forced gratitude, not pretending every painful thing was wonderful. You do not need to romanticize suffering. But after enough inner work, you may begin feeling grateful for what you have discovered. Grateful that you can now see when approval seeking begins. Grateful that comparison no longer controls the whole day. Grateful that a wound which once determined every relationship has become quieter. Grateful that you can sit alone without immediately feeling abandoned. Grateful that silence is beginning to feel like home. Gratitude shifts attention. The ego is always searching for what is missing. Who did not call? What you do not have? Where you should be by now? Who is ahead? What went wrong? Gratitude gently brings attention back to what is here. This breath, this morning, the body carrying you through another day. Someone who cares. A lesson you once could not understand. Light entering the room. Rain against a window. A moment without conflict. The ordinary becomes sacred when you are present enough to notice it. And perhaps gratitude is less about making a list and more about developing a way of seeing. You begin to realize that many of the moments you rushed through were already filled with peace. You were simply somewhere else mentally. Peace was in the walk, but you were thinking about tomorrow. Peace was in the meal, but you were replaying yesterday. Peace was in the quiet room, but you were inside someone else's opinion. Peace was in the present, but your attention had left. This is why the practice is always return. Return to your breath. Return to the body. Return to awareness. Return to source. Return to love. You will forget. Of course you will. There will be days when all the old patterns return. You will compare. You will overthink. You will want reassurance. You will become attached. You will replay something that happened years ago, and then perhaps another old habit appears. You begin judging yourself for forgetting everything you thought you learned. But even this is an opportunity to return. The moment you notice that you have drifted, you are already coming home. You do not have to turn one fearful morning into a fearful week. You do not have to make one reaction into a new identity. You can begin again in the next breath. This is the mercy of awareness. There is always another moment available. Perhaps each morning, before you give your attention to the world, give a little of it to yourself. Before messages, before news, before discovering what everyone else is doing, sit quietly for a few moments. Feel your breath. Notice the body and ask one question. How do I want to be today? Not how much do I need to accomplish? Not who do I need to impress? Not how do I make sure nothing goes wrong? How do I want to be? Peaceful, present, loving, honest, passionate, open. This becomes your intention. Then life begins testing it. Someone becomes impatient. A plan changes. A message disappoints you. An insecurity appears. This does not mean your spiritual practice failed. This is the practice. It is easy to feel peaceful when nothing disturbs you. The deeper work begins when disturbance appears and you remember that you do not have to become the disturbance. Someone brings anger. You do not have to become anger. Someone brings fear. You do not have to become fear. Someone misunderstands you. You do not have to abandon yourself trying to force understanding. You can remain connected to the center within. Sometimes the peaceful response will be silence. Sometimes it will be a clear no. Sometimes it'll be an apology. Sometimes it will be leaving. Peace is not passivity. Peace is freedom from unconscious reaction. And as you practice this, your life becomes less crowded inside. Fewer imaginary conversations. Less defending yourself to people who are not even present. Less comparison. Less rehearsing. Less checking whether someone approves. More presence. More space. More of your own life available to you. Then one day you may notice something simple. The person who once occupied your thoughts every morning does not appear as often. The argument you replayed for years feels farther away. Someone else's success no longer feels like evidence of your failure. A delay no longer means life has forgotten you. Uncertainty no longer automatically means danger. You sit alone and realize you are no longer trying to escape your own company. This is inner freedom, not a life without difficulty, not a life without pain. A life in which difficulty no longer has complete authority over your consciousness. The waves still rise, but you remember the ocean. The clouds still appear, but you remember the sky. Winter still comes, but you no longer demand that every season look like spring. And underneath all of it, Source remains, the quiet life within you, the presence that does not disappear when circumstances change. You may lose awareness of it. You may forget, but you do not lose the Source itself, because it is not something outside you that must be earned. It is the deeper life from which you have never truly been separate. And perhaps this is the final understanding. Focusing on yourself was never about becoming more self-centered. It was about becoming less ego-centered. It was about withdrawing your attention from the frightened personality that needs to control everyone and returning to the deeper consciousness that knows how to love without possession. It was about remembering that peace does not come from making everyone behave correctly. It comes from becoming aligned with the part of you that does not require constant defense. It was about understanding that you do not have to chase your worth. You do not have to manufacture peace. You do not have to convince the world that you deserve to exist fully. You are not trying to become worthy. You are remembering that worth was never missing. You are not trying to create love. You are removing the fear that blocks its expression. You are not trying to invent a new self. You are gently releasing what was never your deepest identity, the approval seeking, the comparison, the resentment, the control, the fear of being misunderstood, the belief that your life should look like someone else's. Layer by layer, you begin coming home. And from this place, you can allow other people to walk their path. You do not have to follow them mentally. You do not have to manage their lessons. You do not have to understand every choice they make. You can love them. You can bless them. You can release them. You can forgive them. And you can remain where you are, present, centered, connected. There is such peace in allowing people to be who they are while giving yourself permission to become who you are. No chasing, no forcing, no constant explaining, just clarity. When you feel yourself disappearing into another person's behavior, return. When comparison takes your attention, return. When resentment pulls you backward, return. When fear pulls you forward into an imaginary future, return. When you forget your worth, return. Return to your breath. Return to awareness. Return to forgiveness. Return to gratitude. Return to love. Return to Source. And if you have to return 1,000 times, return 1,000 times. There is no failure in returning. Perhaps returning is the path. So as you move from this moment back into your ordinary life, you do not need to remember every idea. You only need to remember this. Your attention is your life. Give it carefully. Do not spend all of it trying to control what was never yours to control. Let other people have their opinions. Let them walk their paths. Let the past remain where it belongs. Let tomorrow arrive in its own time. And give yourself permission to be here, fully, not proving, not chasing, not comparing, simply present. The peace you have been searching for may not be waiting somewhere outside you. The love you have been trying to earn may not be something another person can permanently provide. The wisdom you have been looking for may not require another answer. Perhaps it requires remembrance. Remember the stillness beneath the noise. Remember the awareness beneath the thought. Remember the love beneath the fear. Remember the source beneath the separation. You already carry the wisdom you have been seeking. Perhaps, for a little while, you simply forgot.